was known.
Hello and welcome, I'm Ruby Barlow and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some headlines of this hour. Israel says its Air Force hits Iran's presidential office and Supreme National Security Council compound with multiple munitions. The military says other key regime sites are also targeted days after joint US-Israeli strikes kill Iran's supreme leader at a separate compound. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the war with Iran will not last for years as Israel strikes Hezbollah targets in Lebanon and Iran hits Gulf states hosting US bases. US President Donald Trump earlier projected a 4 to 5 week conflict, but now signals a broader, open-ended campaign as the fighting expands. Hezbollah says it targets 3 Israeli military bases with drones and rockets, including Ramat David, Meron, and a site in the Golan Heights, in response to Israeli strikes on its strongholds in Lebanon. The Iran-backed group says the attacks follow Israeli airstrikes on dozens of Lebanese cities, including southern suburbs of Beirut. The United States confirms its embassy in Riyadh is hit by drones overnight, closes the facility and urges Americans to shelter in place. Saudi officials say 2 drones caused a small fire and minor damage as witnesses report smoke and explosions in the diplomatic quarter. China denies reports it is providing military support to Iran and says its backing is political and moral, not weapon supplies. Beijing, which relies heavily on oil shipments through the Strait of Hormuz, condemns US and Israeli actions and calls for a ceasefire and return to nuclear talks. US officials say American forces destroy Iran's Revolutionary Guard's command posts, air defense systems, and missile and drone launch sites in weekend strikes. US Central Command says the sustained operations also target military airfields as the Middle East conflict escalates. At least 42 civilians are killed and 104 wounded in clashes between Afghan and Pakistani forces between February 26th and March 2nd, the United Nations says. The figures come from the UN mission in Afghanistan as cross-border fighting escalates between the two neighbours. Former President Bill Clinton tells lawmakers that Donald Trump once said he had some great ties with Jeffrey Epstein before their relationship soured. In a video deposition to a House committee, Clinton says Trump raised Epstein at a golf event in the early 2000s, years before his presidency. And to a breaking story, Qatar's Foreign Ministry spokesperson has confirmed that Iran's missile targets are not limited to military sites, but include all of Qatar's territory. The spokesperson also revealed that there were attempts to attack Hamad International Airport, but all of them failed. In addition, almost 8,000 people remain stranded in Qatar as airspace remains closed. There has been no ongoing communication with Iran, and Qatar is fully prepared to deal with the ongoing threat, with enough interceptor missiles in stock. Regarding Iranian jets, Qatar confirmed that the jets, which were shot down on 2nd of March, entered Qatari airspace despite warnings and were heading towards Doha before being targeted. Qatar is still searching for the crews. The spokesperson also denied claims of Mossad cells operating in the country. Qatar stressed that such attacks will not go unanswered, reinforcing its readiness and resolve in the face of ongoing threats. And now joining us live, we have Rowan Gunaratne, International Affairs expert located in Singapore. Rowan, thanks so much for joining us today. What do you think it could mean if Qatar joins in the fighting as this war would spread regionally?
Qatar will join the coalition to fight Iran because of 2 principal reasons. Qatar is one of the countries that is being deliberately targeted by the Iranian regime. And the Iranians have fired a very significant number of missiles and drones, both at UAE and Qatar. And of course, there are other countries they have attacked, that is Bahrain, Kuwait, and also Jordan, what we are witnessing at this point is the Middle East and the Gulf countries surrounding Iran, they are turning against Iran. And that it is very likely that a very robust coalition will be formed by the United States to confront the Iranian regime.
Right. And what internal pressures do you see affecting the Qatari response there? You have perhaps political, economic, ethnic factors which may be affecting their response to these attacks.
You are absolutely correct, because there is something called the Arab Street. That is, there are people who are very much against the Israelis and the Jews, and there will be some opposition. But I believe that once the leadership gives the green light, there will be no such pressure. In the case of Qatar, of course, the government very tightly controls the local Qatari population as well as the foreign workers. So in the case of Qatar, I believe that there will be no pressure, and Qatar will readily join the United States in such a coalition. We are also seeing that of all the military bases in the region, the Americans have a very large and a very old base in Qatar. So the Qatari population, they are aware of the alliance or the relationship between Qatar and the United States.
Right. Now, please don't go very far as we move to our next update, where Kuwait's foreign ministry has strongly condemned the attack on the US embassy in the country, calling it a flagrant violation of all international norms and laws. In a statement, the ministry reaffirmed Kuwait's right to take all necessary actions to protect its security, territory, citizens and residents. The condemnation underscores Kuwait's commitment to safeguarding its sovereignty and ensuring the safety of all individuals within its borders, while rejecting any form of aggression on its soil. Our next update from the region, Qatar Energy has announced it will stop the production of some downstream products in Qatar, including urea, polymers, methanol, aluminium and other items. This decision follows an attack earlier this week on 2 of its installations in northern Qatar. The company previously halted LNG production and associated products. The move is part of Qatar Energy's response to escalating security concerns in the region impacting its operations. The company made the announcement on X, stating the decision will affect key sectors in its energy production chain. Now, joining us live, we have Alison Matla, who is a former AP Bureau Chief located in Bucharest in Romania. Alison, thanks so much for joining us. Now, we're seeing these impacts move from oil products now into aluminium, urea, of course, which is very important in agriculture as a fertilizer. How could the war in this region start affecting the market globally in manufacturing, but in other areas as well, perhaps unexpected areas to the average viewer?
It could be massive. It's like when you throw a pebble into a pond, the ripples go out and out. It's the same thing here. This is a crucial area. It's one of the key areas of the earth where so many countries are concentrated. There's so many, there's fuel there, and there's all kinds of mineral resources there, which are very important. So it really could have a knock-on effect. And not just what is produced there. Of course, we have, the Straits of Hormuz, which is blocked at the moment, which is there are fears this will send the prices of petrol or gas skyrocketing. But other things, manufacturing and so on, as you said, and tourism as well. I mean, these countries, particularly, the Emirates, but not only, rely heavily on tourism. And it's not just the tourists that will have to leave now. It's the reputation which will last, as this place, which was billed as a sort of paradise, is actually, you can go there and be struck by an Iranian drone. So it will have long-lasting impact on the whole region, as it's a powder keg, it's an area for instability, borders change, there are drones everywhere. So it will, and it also depends on what the other countries say, big countries like Russia, like the European Union, like China. China is saying now that it supports Iran politically, but it's not sending military weapons. But there could be knock-on effects because of what is happening, because these countries can't export. They're considered unstable countries, and they can't import either. So it will have a big effect on, I think, world trade and beyond. Just strikes, missile strikes on Iran, and Iran strikes on its neighbours and some of its allies in the region. And the longer it goes on, the more unstable the region is seen, and the more it will affect global trade and exports and imports.
Alison, of course you're joining us live from Romania, and there is a massive diaspora of Europeans living in the Gulf states for various reasons. How has Europe been reacting the last 4 days?
Well, I mean, I've looked at the British. I'm British. I've looked at the British papers, particularly, and there's lots of big stories about how British influencers, British sports stars, other stars who went there for a tax-free, better way, a sunnier way of life, etc., etc. And they post all these idyllic images saying they're in paradise, and now they're sending images from like bomb shelters. And there's people scrambling to get out. The flights are being cancelled. Airports have basically been closed. And people have been trying to cross borders to get out any way they can. So there is a lot of that in the European newspapers, not so much where I'm in Romania, because there are influences from Romania in the country. There have been some reports, but this does affect Europeans, and that is precisely why on the first day it was unclear what Iran was doing, because they just striking US military bases? No, they were striking hotels. I understand, and where Westerners are based, because they see this Iran, which is a very entrenched, isolated regime, sees this as a war. Basically, it's not just Israel and the US, but it sees itself as hunkering down against the West, and that's where Westerners are. They're in a lot of these countries, and they're tourism, or they're living there part time, or they're doing business, and that is precisely why they struck hotels. I understand they also struck Amazon. That is a sort of quintessential Western company. It's an American company. So it's not just American military sites that are under attack, but places where Westerners go, they gather, and also Western companies. So it is affecting, I'm talking about America, but it is affecting Europe. And also there are fears that Europe is within range of possible Iranian attacks. There were two, drones intercepted that were going to hit Cyprus, where there are British bases. Now Cyprus is in the European Union, so it does affect Europe, and it is a main story in the European media how it is going to affect Europe as it goes on. We see that Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, the French President, the German Chancellor, are going to offer some defense backup. They're not going to take part in the conflict, but Iran has said if Europe does join the conflict, they will be considered an enemy and they'll be legitimate strike targets.
Right. Please don't go far, Alison. As we move to our next story, Iran's Revolutionary Guards have warned of more intense attacks against the United States and Israel as the conflict enters its fourth day. A spokesperson stated that the enemy should expect continuous punitive attacks, with a threat of escalating violence against both countries. The situation continues to unfold with heightened tensions in the region. This comes as US and Israel continue to strike Iran, with Israel also targeting Hezbollah in Lebanon. The strikes have resulted in the death of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, and other senior officials from the Iranian regime. The Israeli military has also confirmed it carried out airstrikes on Iran's presidential office and the National Security Council building in Tehran. According to the Israeli Air Force, the strikes targeted facilities within the leadership compound of what it described as the Iranian terrorist regime. The military said numerous munitions were dropped during the operation, hitting key buildings, including the presidential office and the Supreme National Security Council. Let's listen in.
הלילה מטוסי חיל האוויר, בהכוונה מדויקת של אגף המודיעין, תקפו את מתחם ההנהגה האיראני בלב טהרן, המפקדה החשובה והמרכזית ביותר של המשטר. המתחם נפרס על פני רחובות רבים בלב טהרן. במהלך תקיפת המתחם, פגענו בלשכת הנשיאות, במתחם ההתכנסות של הפורום הבכיר ביותר של המשטר, ובתשתיות ההנהגה והפיקוד הנוספות. בנוסף, תקפנו את מתחם המועצה העליונה לביטחון לאומי, הגוף הרשמי האחראי על קבלת החלטות בסוגיות מדיניות ואסטרטגיות באיראן.
Joining us again live, we have Professor Rowan Gunaratne, who is an international affairs expert located in Singapore. Now, Rowan, how long can we see this war lasting as the days move on and the impacts have started moving wider? We're seeing perhaps a ripple effect, especially as some of the Gulf states have been threatening to join in military efforts. How long could we expect to see this war lasting, especially as not only has Ali Khamenei been taken out of the picture, several other, about 40 members of IRGC leadership have been removed, but the war efforts are still ongoing. How long do you think we could expect to see this conflict last for?
Very much depends on the capabilities of the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, the largest military security and intelligence organization in Iran. There are about 800,000 members of this group, and they also have about 2,500 to 3,000 missiles. So if you look at the capacity of the Iranian regime to fight this campaign, it is quite significant. But at the same time, the United States and Israel, now we are seeing that the French, the British, the Germans, and other countries are also joining in. So because the coalition that is fighting Iran is expanding, it is very likely that this war will last at least 2 weeks. I do not think that Iran can endure a campaign beyond 2 weeks. But during these 2 weeks, Iran will inflict very significant damage on the neighborhood, because they will use not only missiles, they also have other special weapons that they are likely to use. And that is why it is so important during this period for there to be a swift end to this war. My greatest fear is that Iran was manufacturing 12 nuclear bombs, and Iran was about to produce a functional nuclear weapon. So it was the right time that the United States and Israel responded to Iran, but it is so important that this war doesn't protract, and the US-Israeli offensive will enable the protesters to rise against the regime, but the regime remains still very strong. That's why I said at least it will take another 2 weeks.
Rowan, please don't go far as we move to our next story, where Iran's foreign ministry has issued a stern warning to European nations, urging them not to take part in US-Israeli campaign against the Islamic Republic. Spokesman Esmail Bakai declared that any European involvement would be considered an act of war. He emphasized that such actions would be viewed as complicity with aggressors, escalating the conflict. The warning follows a statement from Germany, France, and the UK on Sunday, in which they expressed their readiness to take proportionate defensive action to target and destroy Iran's missile and drone capabilities. The 3 European countries have raised concerns about Iran's recent missile and drone strikes in the region. Iran has vehemently rejected any foreign intervention, stating that it would not tolerate further aggression. Let's listen in.
This would be an act of war. Any such act against Iran would be regarded as complicity with the aggressors. It would be regarded as an act of war against Iran. Defensive is synonym for offensive. Doesn't make sense. Do they want to deprive Iran of its capability and capacity to fight back against the aggressors? That would be a shame if these countries take sides with the aggressors. They have already...
Joining us again live, we have Alison Matla, who is a former AP Bureau Chief located in Bucharest, Romania. Now, just touching on some of your comments earlier, Alison, what do you think it will take for Europe to join this conflict, if they do?
I think Europe would not want to join this conflict, we can tell at the beginning, but by the same token, they don't want to expose themselves to any attacks. As I said earlier, drones were sent to Cyprus, which is in the European Union, where the British have a base there. Okay, they were intercepted, but that is out of the conflict region and it's in the European Union. In Romania ourselves, we do have a missile defense shield, which is precisely for attacks from Iran that could come to Europe. So I think there is a long-standing fear that Iran could target Europe. It's already said it cannot target the United States, which is why it's been targeting Middle Eastern countries, which is a very risky thing for it to have done because those are its allies and those are in the region. And I don't think it can afford to make enemies of those countries. But that is the decision that it took, and that's what it's done. But I think Europe wants to be prepared, and that's clear, by this trio of Germany, France, and the United Kingdom, that they will offer defensive action. Now, to the Iranian regime, the Iranian government, that means aggression. But to Europe, it means we will defend our territory if needs be. Europe has been aware, as I said, for a long time, that Iran could target, should it want to, with long-range missiles, Europe. I'm not saying it would. It's got enough on its hands, if you like, with what's happening in the region. But I think Europe wants to be prepared in case there is an overspill of the war. And these drones, what were they doing there? Was it a mistake? Was it a warning? It's hard to say. You can't afford, with a war like that going on in the region, in the nearby region, to not do anything. That would be very unwise indeed. So, but I think Iran is sending a message: don't join the Israeli-Iranian strikes, which Europe shows no sign of doing. But by the same token, it is saying we're not just going to sit here idly and watch what happens. We will prepare defensive if needs be. And Iran has got the capability to strike Europe. Obviously, countries like Romania, Bulgaria, etc., are closer, and Britain and France are further away, but it does have the capability, and these countries are in NATO. And the NATO is, if one attack on a NATO country means an attack on all. So Europe does need to be prepared to step up its defense. If Iran, of course, it's war. So, of course, Iran is saying that's aggression and these will be legitimate targets. We're in a very, very tense and volatile situation at the moment.
Of course. Alison, thank you so much for joining us today on the show. It's been a pleasure. Now, as we move to our next story, the Israeli military has announced the creation of a buffer zone in Lebanon following orders from the defense minister to seize additional positions along the border. The military stated that the Northern Command has moved forward, taking control of strategic terrain to protect Israeli residents from any threat. The buffer zone is part of Israel's strategy to defend its border. This comes as Israeli forces have advanced into Lebanese territory along the border, following instructions from Israel's defense minister to seize additional strategic positions. Ground troops moved forward from Kufar, Kila, and the Kayem plains, raising concerns over Israel's effort to establish a wider security belt in South Lebanon. This move comes amid rising tensions in the region. Joining us again, we have Professor Rowan Gunaratne, who is an international affairs expert located in Singapore. Now, Rowan, Israel is currently occupying part of, beg your pardon. Do you see that this advance from Israel into the south of Lebanon could turn into an occupied territory, especially if the Israeli Defense Forces stay in the region after the strikes against Hezbollah discontinue and after the war has finished?
Israeli strategy is preemption, meaning if any country or any group threatens Israel, Israel will advance and occupy the territory, and that is what they mean by a buffer zone. So at this point, the northern front of the Israeli military, the IDF, they have now taken territory, the south of Lebanon, north of Israel, and from that territory, they are conducting operations against the Lebanese Hezbollah that has a very significant presence. Israel will want to keep control of that territory as long as the Lebanese Hezbollah is intact. The Lebanese Hezbollah has been weakened, but still it's a very significant organization. If you recall, October 7th, 2023 was the Hamas attack. And one day after that, the Lebanese Hezbollah fought by firing so many projectiles into Israel. And just 3 days ago, the Lebanese Hezbollah decided to move against Israel. And of course, now Israel is bombing Hezbollah targets both in Beirut and in the south of Lebanon. So what is going to happen in the coming days and coming months is that IDF will build a very significant capability south of Lebanon, north of Israel, and will continue to strike the Lebanese Hezbollah, kill their leaders, and decimate their rank and file, and dismantle the infrastructure of the Lebanese Hezbollah.
Rohan Gunaratne, thank you so much for joining us today on the show. Now we move to Russia, where the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has warned that the global nuclear threat is intensifying due to the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. Speaking to the press, Lavrov emphasized that the situation is becoming more acute, with far-reaching consequences for global security. He stated that Russian President Vladimir Putin is committed to diffusing tensions in the region and will address concerns over the strikes on Iran's oil infrastructure with Iranian partners. Listen in.
Эта акция, эта война, которую сейчас развязали против Ирана, она, во-первых, может стимулировать движение в пользу создания ядерного оружия, и не только в Иране. Такое движение тут же появится и в странах, арабских странах, которые соседствуют с Исламской Республикой Иран. Поэтому внешне парадоксальным образом объявленная благородная цель начать войну для того, чтобы не было распространения ядерного оружия, может стимулировать совершенно противоположное.
And that's all that we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.